No one saw this coming, and he'll probably end up in a court in the United States somewhere. And the challenge now for America will be to get a replacement government made up of those who won the election, clearly won the election in Venezuela before, but Maduro, being a dictator, had refused to accept that result. And to see if, and it's a big if, and it's a big challenge, we can get peaceful change and a respectable regime and government in Caracas.
President Trump has just announced that the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, and his missus have been captured and flown out of the country after a series of at least 7 explosions in the capital, Caracas, overnight. I'm delighted to be able to speak to someone who has written extensively on this subject, Times Radio's own Andrew Neil. Andrew, welcome to the programme, sir. What on earth do you think has been happening there? What can you tell?
It's the most remarkable development, and it's a quite amazing military operation by the United States, not only to take out a lot of Venezuela's military infrastructure in the heart of Caracas, but to essentially kidnap the president of the country and his wife and whisk them out of the country. I mean, if you want to see regime change in action, for good or ill, whether it works or not is another matter, but This is regime change in action. And no one saw this coming. And he'll probably end up in a court in the United States somewhere. And the challenge now for America will be to get a replacement government made up of those who won the election, clearly won the election in Venezuela before, but Maduro, being a dictator, had refused to accept that result. And to see if, and it's a big if, and it's a big challenge, we can get peaceful change and a respectable regime and government in Caracas.
Yeah, it's something like 7 million people, isn't it, who've left Venezuela in the last
8 million.
It's 8 million, is it now? Yes.
8 million,
yeah.
And many of them, Rod, simply in search of a meal. You know.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Venezuela sits on the largest oil reserves in the world, the largest in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. And yet its people have been starving. There are power cuts, regular power cuts, water shortages, unable to grow food, unable to feed themselves. A small military elite backed by Cuban intelligence has run the country. And by the way, this is a huge failure of Cuban intelligence. The Cubans have provided basically the bodyguards and the intellectual muscle to keep Maduro, the intelligence muscle, to keep Maduro in power. They failed. U.S. Special Forces got him. He's gone. The regime is over. Not long before we may be seeing the same in Havana.
Well, I was about to mention that, because obviously that is your next is the words which are being directed towards Havana, presumably, because Cuba was always the one which President Trump had his eye on, isn't it?
Well, Cuba is wholly dependent on Venezuela for oil. It gets a little from Mexico. It's got some from its own resources. It gets almost nothing from Russia. Most of it came from Venezuela. You used to get 100,000 barrels a day. And recently that's been cut to 30,000 barrels a day. That's brought enormous hardship to the people of Cuba. Again, malnutrition, power cuts, water shortages. They can't even use their electric fans at night. Cubans are sleeping outdoors because it's so hot and there's no way to cool the house down. That 30,000 barrels a day, I can assure you, will now stop. There'll be no Venezuelan oil going to Cuba. And I've just been talking to some friends about this and said, it must be squeaky bum time for the gerontocracy in Havana at the moment, because Maduro's gone. They may not now be far behind. By the way, Cuba in this century has lost almost 3 million of its people. And it will be no surprise that these people are the young and the ambitious.
The young and the ambitious who have tended to head to America. And, of course, it's a dynastic gerontocracy.
Yes.
That's the other thing, a totalitarian
as all good
dynastic
communist gerontocracies are. They become dynastic.
The question that has to be asked is, over the years, the US has had a mixed result when it has meddled in its own backyard, as certainly Donald Trump would say it, whether it's overthrowing Allende and effectively through the CIA installing Pinochet in Chile, whether it's Noriega in Panama, which this seems to be the kind of closest similarity to in terms of what's happened, or indeed the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. This seems at the moment to be a no-lose situation for Trump, doesn't it?
Well, in Panama, the U.S. had about 20,000 troops on the ground. And my understanding is they haven't got any troops on the ground in Venezuela. So that's a plus. Look, I think we can be almost in awe of the military capability that America has just shown overnight to do what it's done. Doesn't yet mean we can be sure it is, quote, a good thing. Because as you point out, regime change is not, America's record in regime change is not exactly encouraging, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Libya to Syria and to half a dozen Latin American countries as well. So there's a lot still to be done to make this a success, and we don't know if it's going to be. If you want to be positive, I would say this. The great danger, as we saw in Iraq, when you change a regime, rather than a peaceful transition, you end up with a civil war. We had a bit of that in Syria as well. We've had an element of that even in Afghanistan. We've certainly had it in Libya. I'm not sure that's going to happen. Maduro was so unpopular, over 90% unpopularity rating in the recent poll. There was a clear opposition involving also the woman who won the Nobel Prize, but also another colleague of hers who actually stood for election. Well, the clear winners. And I think in the election of 2024. So the challenge now will be to get this peaceful transition, to get the people who won but were denied the fruits of victory in 2024, to get them in as close to a democratically elected government as you can get in these difficult circumstances. That is the hope going forward.
It was, of course, at one point the richest and most peaceful and prosperous South American country, wasn't it? Perhaps it may be so again.
It was indeed. It was a hugely successful and prosperous place with a vibrant culture and great links with the rest of Latin America, the United States, with people who are enterprising and hardworking and proud of their country and so on. It would be a great thing. Be a great thing if we could get back to that. And by the way, just to be a little parochial and domestic, great news for Brits at the petrol pump if this could happen. Because if Venezuela could get back to the production it had at a time when oil prices are already, in my view, set to fall quite dramatically, pumping up oil production in Venezuela would be really bad news for Russia and really good news for countries like Britain that consume oil. So the rest of the world could benefit from this as well. At the moment, I'm cautiously optimistic, but like you, Rod, I've seen it all go wrong before in these circumstances, so we can't be sure yet.
Andrew Neil, thanks ever so much for talking to us this morning.
You.
And you can hear more from Andrew with his views on the political machinations of Brexit and Gove and Johnson and all that stuff later on in our programme.